They said no one ever married Grayson Holt twice. The first time, his bride died. The second, his bride ran. At 18, Ivy Calder never planned to be anyone's third mistake. But when her father's ranch fell into foreclosure, and the only offer of help came tied to a marriage contract, she signed it. The wedding was quiet, the vows brief, his eyes unreadable. But it wasn't the ceremony that silenced their town. It was the gift he gave her afterward, a gift that made every whisper die in the wind and every secret rise to the surface.
Hello, if you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and tap the notification bell. Type in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as touching as this one, or maybe even crazier. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin.
The wind rolled low across Montana's Bitterroot Valley, carrying dust, silence, and the sound of something ending. 18-year-old Ivy Calder stood on the porch of a ranch that used to feel alive. Her father's cattle pens were empty, the fences sagging like broken ribs. She could still hear her father's voice in the quiet, always saying the same thing when life got hard. Calder land doesn't quit, even when we do. But he'd been gone 6 months now, and the letters from the bank didn't care about family mottos. Her mother's health had worsened, medical bills piled higher than hay bales, and each passing week the land her family built began to die in pieces. So when Grayson Holt's letter came, she didn't believe it was real. It was typed neatly, with no emotion. "I can settle your father's debt. The condition is marriage. No obligations beyond appearances. You will remain at Holt Ranch. I will ensure your mother's care." No affection, no promises, just a proposition dressed in politeness. People in town had their own stories about Grayson Holt. They said he owned half of Montana's grazing land, that his horses could outrun cars, and his money could buy silence anywhere. They said he hadn't smiled since his wife died, and now, apparently, he wanted a wife again. The rumors spread fast. Calder girl's selling herself for land. Guess tragedy runs in that man's brides. But Ivy didn't have the luxury of pride. She signed the agreement with trembling hands and one prayer, that survival would be worth the cost. The morning she left, the valley was gray and brittle with cold. Her mother couldn't look at her, only whispered, "Maybe this is what saving looks like, honey. Maybe it's not pretty." The ride to Holt Ranch was long and silent, miles of wire fences and open range until the land stretched into eternity. The main house rose from the horizon like something carved out of old grief, massive, elegant, and empty-looking. Grayson Holt stood waiting by the gate. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with eyes like winter sky, pale, unreadable, and endlessly tired. "Miss Calder," he greeted. His voice was low, firm, with that quiet authority of a man used to being obeyed. "It's Mrs. Holt now," she said, before she could stop herself. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then just the ghost of a smile. "So it is." The ceremony was held in his study. 2 witnesses, his lawyer and the ranch foreman. A signature. A ring. No music, no vows, no kiss. When it was done, he handed her a small box, plain wood, wrapped in leather string. He said, "This is yours. Don't open it yet. You'll know when." She looked down at it, light, simple, unassuming. The kind of gift you forget until it remembers you. He turned and walked away. "Dinner's at 7, he said over his shoulder. Then he was gone. The house was beautiful but hollow. Walls of polished oak, portraits of ancestors staring from every corner, and the faint scent of rain on old stone. She was shown to her room, not beside his, but down the hall. A housekeeper, gray-haired and kind-eyed, gave her a soft look. "Don't let the quiet fool you, dear. There's life here still, somewhere." But that night, when Ivy sat alone by the window, the quiet didn't feel alive. It felt watchful, like the house was holding its breath. She set the small wooden box on her bedside table. The lamplight caught its edge, carved initials, G.H. She whispered to no one, "What did you give me, Mr. Holt?" Outside, thunder rolled across the valley like an answer she wasn't ready to hear.
The next morning, sunlight crept slowly across the valley, turning the frost on the fence lines into a shimmer of silver. Ivy woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like it's listening. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and cedarwood. No servants rushing, no chatter, just the rhythmic sound of boots across tile. Grayson Holt was already at the table, reading the newspaper like a man who hadn't slept. He glanced up briefly. "Morning," he said. She hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to sit or stand. "Morning," she replied quietly. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Eat something before the tour. You'll need to know the land." "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said without looking up. "You're a Calder. This valley's half yours now." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they sounded like a verdict. Breakfast was short. Afterward, he walked her through the estate. Thousands of acres of rolling pasture, stables larger than her father's house, and workers who nodded respectfully as they passed. The land was magnificent, but every inch of it felt built on restraint. "Do you ever leave this place?" she asked. He paused, looking out over the hills. "Not often. Some places don't let you leave until you've earned your peace." She studied him quietly. "And have you?" He didn't answer. By evening, the weight of the house began to settle around her. The portraits in the hallway seemed to follow her movements. One in particular, a woman in a soft blue dress, kept drawing her gaze. The plaque beneath the frame read, "Janelle Holt, 1990-2017. The woman's eyes were kind, but sad, and hauntingly familiar, almost like looking into an older, gentler reflection of herself. She turned away, uneasy. In town, she'd heard whispers that Grayson's wife had died in a fire. Some said he built the ranch's chapel for her. Others said he locked it forever. That night, she joined him for dinner at a table long enough for 20, though only 2 places were set. The housekeeper poured wine, then left in silence. They ate without speaking for several minutes, the clinking of silverware echoing like distant thunder. Finally, Ivy broke the quiet. "Why me?" she asked. He set his fork down slowly. "Excuse me? You could have chosen anyone, a partner, an heiress, someone who wouldn't make the town whisper, so why me?" Grayson studied her for a long moment. Then softly, "Because you're the only one who didn't ask for anything." The answer wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing either. Later, when she returned to her room, she found the small wooden box still sitting on her bedside table. Only now a note was tucked beneath it. "Patience builds bridges faster than pride destroys them." She turned the box in her hands. It was light, almost empty. Whatever secret it held, it wasn't ready to be found. Outside, the ranch lights glowed faintly against the night. Somewhere beyond the fences, wolves howled, a sound both lonely and alive. And for the first time, Ivy realized that silence wasn't the same as peace. Sometimes silence was the sound of something waiting to begin. If you were given a gift you weren't allowed to open, a gift that might hold the truth about the person you just married, could you wait, or would curiosity win? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes patience is the only key that fits the lock.
Rain came to the Bitterroot Valley that week.
the kind that stayed, steady and gray, soaking into the earth until even silence felt wet. Ivy woke each morning to the sound of it tapping against her window, the horizon swallowed by mist. She'd begun to move through the mansion quietly, learning its rhythms, the way the pipes hissed before dawn, the scent of sage that lingered near the west wing, the locked door at the end of the upstairs hall. She had asked the housekeeper about it once. The woman had only said, "Some doors don't open for questions, dear. They open for time." But time, in this house, seemed to stand perfectly still. Grayson left early most mornings, riding out to the north pastures or to town meetings. When he was gone, Ivy explored. One afternoon she found herself in the library, a cathedral of leather-bound volumes and dust motes dancing in thin light. She traced her fingers along the spines until one caught her attention, a photo album tucked between books on architecture. Inside were images of a woman she instantly recognized, Ivy Holt. Her hair fell in soft waves, her smile bright against mountain sunlight. Every page was filled with life, horseback rides, charity events, laughter frozen in time. But near the end, the picture stopped. The last photograph showed Grayson and Elena standing in front of the old chapel. His hand rested over hers on the railing. On the back of the photo, written in Elena's handwriting, "For every door that locks, there's one that waits to be found." Ivy sat there for a long time, staring at the words. That night, she dreamed of the chapel. In her dream, the doors stood open, light spilling out, and she heard Grayson's voice calling her name. But when she stepped inside, the floor gave way beneath her, and she woke, gasping in the dark. The wooden box still sat on her bedside, unmoved. For the first time, she touched it, pressing her thumb to the carved initials. It was cold, too cold for something that small. 2 days later, Grayson returned early from a business trip, soaked from the rain. When Ivy met him in the foyer, she noticed the exhaustion behind his composure. "You should have stayed in town until the storm cleared," she said. He shook his head. "This place doesn't like to be left alone." Something in his tone made her pause. They stood there in the quiet for a moment, thunder rolling low outside. Finally, she asked, "Why do you keep that chapel locked?" His expression changed just slightly, but enough. "He told you not to go near it." "I didn't. But people talk. People always talk. Then maybe they deserve an answer." Grayson exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "You want an answer?" "Yes." He met her gaze, and the calm in his voice chilled her. "She died in that chapel. That's your answer." The words hit the air like gunfire, quick, final, irreversible. Ivy felt her pulse in her throat. "How?" she whispered. He looked away. "She went in there one night. Lightning struck the steeple. The fire started before I reached her." Silence hung between them, raw and heavy. "And you keep it locked?" He nodded once. "Because it's the only part of this land I couldn't rebuild." Later that night, Ivy stood by her window watching the rain swallow the fields. The reflection staring back at her looked older than 18, tired, haunted. She touched the glass. "Elena," she whispered, "what did you leave behind?" As if an answer, the wind shifted, and from somewhere down the hall came a faint creak. She followed it barefoot, her breath shallow. The house was dark except for slivers of lightning cutting through the curtains. The sound led her to the locked door at the end of the hallway. This time, it was slightly open. She hesitated, hand trembling over the frame. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke and roses. A single object rested on a table near the window, a silver hairpin, shaped like a bird. She reached for it, fingers brushing the cool metal, and just then, thunder shook the walls, slamming the door shut behind her. She gasped, heart racing. In the lightning flash, she saw her own reflection in the window, pale, wide-eyed, and standing where Janelle once had. The house seemed to hold its breath. And for the first time, Ivy understood that some ghosts don't haunt for vengeance. They haunt for remembrance. If you discovered your new home still belonged to someone's memory, would you walk away or try to understand the story they left behind?
The storm broke 2 days later, but the air still smelled of rain and smoke. Grayson had been gone since dawn. No explanation, no message, just silence and tire tracks fading into the horizon. Ivy spent the morning in the library again, staring at the silver hairpin she'd found in the locked room. She had cleaned the soot from its wings, revealing small engraved letters. J. H. Janelle Holt. It didn't feel like a keepsake. It felt like a warning. That afternoon, the housekeeper appeared at the door. "Mr. Holt said to give you this." It was a folded envelope, addressed in Grayson's sharp handwriting. Inside, a single line. "If anyone from Brookshire Land and Trust comes by, do not let them in." Below it, a check signed in her name. More money than her family's ranch had ever seen. Her pulse quickened. Why was a billionaire afraid of a land company? By evening, a dark SUV pulled up the drive. 2 men in suits stepped out, smiling too politely. "Mrs. Holt, we're here about the property merger. Mr. Holt asked to collect your signature." "I wasn't informed," she replied carefully. "It's a simple transfer, makes the ranch's paperwork cleaner, just a formality." Her eyes flicked to the logo on their folders. Brookshire Land and Trust, the name from the letter. She shook her head. "No signatures until my husband returns." The man's smile faltered. "You're a smart girl," he said, voice lowering, "but smart girls sometimes get left behind when business moves fast." She stepped back, heart pounding. "Leave my property, now." The other man laughed under his breath, but they left, too easily. From the window, Ivy watched them drive off, their SUV slowing at the end of the dirt road, as if waiting. That night, when Grayson returned, she was waiting in the foyer, her hair unbrushed, her eyes burning. "You lied to me," she said. He froze. "About what?" "About Brookshire Land and Trust. They came today, said you asked me to sign something." His face hardened. "You didn't." "Of course not." He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Good. They've been trying to buy out ranchers all across the valley, using intimidation, false contracts, threats. Your father refused to sell, and it nearly ruined him." Her breath caught. "You knew?" He nodded slowly. "He called me a month before he died. He said they were trying to take everything. I made him a promise, that his daughter would never lose Calder land. That's why I offered the marriage." Ivy stared at him, the pieces snapping together like thunder. "So you didn't want a wife. You wanted to settle a debt." His voice softened. "No. I wanted to keep a promise." The silence between them thickened. She wanted to be angry, but beneath the anger was something heavier. Gratitude tangled with disbelief. He had saved her family, yes, but he had done it without trust. "I didn't need saving," she said. Grayson met her eyes. "Everyone does, Ivy. The trick is admitting it before it's too late." He turned to leave, but she stopped him. "You should have told me." He paused in the doorway. "You wouldn't have believed me." "Try me." For the first time since she'd met him, something cracked in his expression. Not anger, not sorrow, but weariness. "I've already buried one woman I couldn't protect. I wasn't going to risk another." Then he was gone. Hours passed. Ivy sat on the staircase, staring at the wooden box on the table below. Maybe it wasn't just a box. Maybe it was the weight of everything he couldn't say. When she picked it up, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint engraving beneath the lid. "To see the gift, you must lose the fear."
That night, she walked outside barefoot, letting the moonlight soak her in silver. The wind smelled of sage and rain, and somewhere in the distance, she heard coyotes crying. The valley had been gorn from fire, she thought. Maybe love was too. If you found out someone married you not out of love, but to protect you, could you forgive them?
The storm that night was quiet. No thunder, just a heavy rain that blurred the valley into silver and shadow. Ivy couldn't sleep. Grayson hadn't come home. The clock on her nightstand ticked past midnight as she sat with the wooden box in her lap, tracing the carved initials with her thumb. The engraving at the bottom, "To see the gift, you must lose the fear," pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat. Lose the fear. She lit a candle, the flame trembling against the dark. Her hands shook as she untied the leather string. The lid opened with a faint sigh, like the sound of old breath being released. Inside, she expected jewelry, maybe a key, maybe some token of control. Instead, there was a single envelope. Her name was written across it in Grayson's handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a deed, notarized, sealed, transferring ownership of Calder Ranch and half of Holt Ranch entirely to her. At the bottom, a line written by hand. "You were never meant to belong to me. You were meant to belong to yourself." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. All this time she had seen him as the man who held power over her, the man who had rescued her family only to bind her name to his, but in truth, he had been setting her free. The gift wasn't land, it was dignity. A flash of lightning illuminated the window, and for a moment she saw her reflection, the girl who had arrived here, terrified and uncertain, replaced by a woman who finally understood the shape of her own strength. She whispered into the dark, "You could have just told me, Grayson." Then softer, "But maybe you knew I wouldn't have believed you." She looked again at the box, now empty, except for the imprint left by the deed. It seemed smaller somehow, lighter, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. A sudden sound broke the quiet, the rumble of engines outside, headlights cutting across the gravel. Her chest tightened. Brookshire. She grabbed her phone, but the signal was gone. The men moved with precision, heading toward the barn. Fear surged through her, but beneath it was something sharper, steadier. Resolve. If this land was hers now, then so was the fight. She threw on her coat, tucked the deed inside her pocket, and ran into the rain. The night exploded in motion, flashlights cutting through the dark, men shouting orders, the air thick with mud and gasoline. "Mrs. Holt, you really shouldn't be here," one of them sneered as she appeared in the doorway. "I could say the same to you," she replied, voice trembling but clear. He smirked. "You think a piece of paper makes you safe?" "No," she said, "but it makes you a trespasser." Behind them, headlights flared again, brighter, closer. A truck skidded to a stop, and Grayson jumped out, rain plastering his hair to his face. He didn't hesitate, just shouted, "Get away from her!" For a moment, everything froze. Lightning, shouting, wind, the world suspended between danger and deliverance. The men hesitated, then retreated to their vehicles, tires spitting mud as they sped down the drive. When silence returned, Ivy stood there shaking, the rain soaking her dress, the deed still clutched in her hand. Grayson walked up slowly, eyes locking onto hers. "You opened it," he said softly. "I noted. You gave me everything." "No," he said. "I gave you back what was already yours." She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she'd thought and felt, but no words came, only the sound of rain between them, heavy and unrelenting. He reached out, brushing her wet hair from her face, then stepped back. He said, "I never wanted you to feel owned. I just wanted you to feel safe." And before she could answer, he turned toward the barn, shouting orders to the workers as the storm raged around them. That night, Ivy lay awake listening to the rain ease into silence. The box sat open on her dresser, empty now, but glowing faintly in the candlelight like the echo of something sacred.
She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: she wasn't afraid anymore.
The morning after the storm, the valley was quiet again. Too quiet. Ivy woke to the smell of smoke. Not the faint, comforting scent from the fireplace. This was sharp, wild, alive. She stepped outside and saw it, a column of black rising from the North Hills, twisting like a serpent into the pale sky. Wildfire, one of the ranch hands shouted, racing past her. Started near the ridge, winds are carrying it fast. Panic rippled through the air, men shouting, horses thrashing in the stables, radios crackling with broken signals. Ivy ran toward the barn, spotting Grayson already mounting his horse, his shirt soaked in sweat, his face streaked with ash. "You can't go out there alone," she yelled. He turned, eyes blazing with urgency. "I have workers trapped by the fence line. They were clearing debris when it hit. If I don't go, they'll die." "Then I'm coming with you." "Ivy, no." "Yes," she said, her voice steady and fierce. "You gave me this land, now let me stand on it." Their eyes locked, and for the first time, he didn't argue. They rode out together into the rising smoke, the sky turning copper and blood red. The fire moved like a living thing, devouring brush, snapping through fences, hissing as it met the rain-soaked earth. When they reached the ridge, visibility dropped to nothing. Flames leapt across the path like hungry jaws. Grayson shouted over the roar, "Take the west side, herd the horses downhill." Ivy didn't hesitate. She rode hard, swinging open gates, shouting commands, her lungs burning from the smoke. Her world became noise and heat and motion, every heartbeat a promise that she wouldn't lose this land or him. A deafening crack split the air, a burning tree collapsing beside the path. She turned just in time to see Grayson thrown from his horse, vanishing into a wall of smoke. "Grayson!" she screamed. She dismounted, coughing, tears cutting streaks through the suit on her face. The heat pressed against her skin like knives. The fire surrounded her, hissing, crackling, alive. She spotted him near the fence line, half-conscious, pinned under a fallen beam. Without thinking, she ran toward him, ignoring the flames licking at her boots. "Ivy, go back," he shouted hoarsely. "Not without you." She grabbed the beam, muscles trembling, pushing with everything she had. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, with a scream, she shifted it just enough to free his leg. He tried to stand, but collapsed. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "Lean on me, we're almost there." The world roared around them, the fire closing in. They stumbled down the ridge, the smoke choking the air. Ahead she saw a break in the flames, the narrow path to the creek. "Almost there," she shouted, her voice raw. They fell into the shallows, the water hissing as embers landed around them. For a moment, the world went still, just water, breath, and heartbeats. He turned to her, eyes dazed but focused. "You saved my life." "No," she whispered, "I just gave back what you gave me." When rescue crews found them at dawn, the fire had finally died. The valley was scarred black, but the heart of the ranch still stood. Grayson was airlifted to the hospital, alive, barely conscious. Ivy followed in the truck behind, holding his burned hat in her lap, the weight of it grounding her in silence. Outside the window, the land they both fought for rolled by, charred, smoking, but still standing. It looked like ruin, but she knew it was rebirth.
The hospital lights were too bright, too clean, too cold. Ivy sat in the hallway outside Grayson's room, her clothes still smelling faintly of smoke and ash. Her hands were bandaged, her skin raw from the fire, but she didn't feel any of it. All she felt was waiting. Doctors passed, nurses whispered, machines beeped, the world moving in a rhythm that didn't match her heartbeat. She kept replaying it, the flames, his face, the moment he fell.
Every memory burned brighter than the fire itself. When the doctor finally approached, Ivy stood before he could speak. "He is alive," the doctor said gently. "He inhaled too much smoke. Second-degree burns, mild concussion, but he's strong. He's fighting." Her knees almost gave out. "Can I see him?" she whispered. The doctor nodded. Inside the room, Grayson looked smaller somehow, stripped of the armor he always wore. Tubes ran from his arm, monitors hummed, his skin pale against the hospital sheets. Ivy pulled up a chair beside him and sat, her heart breaking and healing all at once. "You're supposed to be indestructible," she murmured. For a long time, there was only the sound of the heart monitor. Then, slowly, his hand twitched, searching. She reached for it instantly. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy at first, then clear. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. She smiled faintly. "Then you don't know me very well." He stared at her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. The weight of everything they'd endured, the fire, the fear, the things neither had said. Finally, his lips curved into a small, fragile smile. "You opened it," he whispered. I nodded, eyes stinging. "I opened it, and you're impossible," she said, laughing softly through her tears. His brow furrowed, but his hand tightened around hers. "I didn't give that to you to impress you." "I know." "I gave it to you so you'd never forget you were never trapped here." "I wasn't," she whispered. "I was home." Hours passed like minutes. She stayed by his side, watching the monitors blink, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Outside, the valley glowed faintly under a blanket of dawn. The fire had scarred it black, but new light touched every ridge, every fence, every inch of land they'd both fought to protect. Some wounds, she thought, don't destroy, they redefine.
3 weeks later, the Bitterroot Valley was beginning to heal. Rain had softened the charred earth. New shoots of grass peeked through blackened soil. And from the porch of Holt Ranch, Ivy could finally see smoke rising from kitchen chimneys again. Not from destruction, but from life resuming. Grayson's recovery was slow but steady. The doctors called it a miracle. Ivy called it stubbornness in human form. Every day she brought him breakfast, read letters from ranchers thanking him for his help, and teased him for being terrible at staying still. "You've built empires," she said, once pouring his coffee, "but you can't sit in a chair for 10 minutes?" He smiled faintly. I wasn't built for comfort. She looked out the window, sunlight washing her face. "Maybe now you are." That evening, they walked the property together for the first time since the fire. The air smelled of rain and sage. The sky glowed orange and lavender over the horizon. They passed the rebuilt barns, the charred fence posts replaced with new timber. Workers waved as they passed, not out of obligation this time, but out of gratitude. At the edge of the field, where the flames had burned hottest, the ground was soft beneath their boots. Ivy knelt and brushed her hand over a patch of green. "Life doesn't ask permission," she said quietly. Grayson nodded. "Neither do you." She laughed softly. "I guess I learned from the best." As they returned to the house, Grayson stopped her near the porch steps. "He never asked you," he said, voice low, "if you wanted to stay." She turned to him surprised. "After everything we've been through, you still think I'd leave?" He replied, "I think you could. That's what I wanted for you. Choice." He reached into his pocket and held out a small object. A pendant shaped like the Holt Ranch brand, with her initials etched beside his. No contracts, no debts, just this. Ivy stared at it, her throat tightening. "You didn't have to." He said, "I know, That's why it matters." She took it, her fingers brushing his. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full. That night, she hung the pendant beside the wooden box on her dresser. The box remained open, the deed still inside, a symbol not of ownership, but of trust. Outside her window, the valley shimmered under moonlight, alive again. She whispered to herself, "You were right, Grayson. Some gifts aren't meant to be opened. They're meant to be understood. If love gave you freedom instead of possession, if it asked you to stay, not because you had to, but because you wanted to, would you call that weakness or the truest strength?"
Spring came early that year. By late March, the valley was green again, stitched with new fences, fresh wildflowers, and the hum of life returning. The fire had left scars across the land, dark, uneven, but oddly beautiful, like a reminder that even ruin can grow roots. At the edge of the rebuilt stables, children's laughter carried on the wind. They were part of a new youth program, the Holt Calder Foundation, named not by Grayson, but by Ivy. Its purpose was simple: to give struggling families the help her father never had to ask for. The first time she saw the sign above the entrance, she cried, not because it bore her name, but because it no longer sounded like charity. It sounded like home. Inside the main hall, sunlight streamed through tall windows. Volunteers arranged chairs, guests murmured softly, cameras clicked. The town had gathered for the foundation's grand opening. Ivy stood near the podium, her heart beating steady. 3 years ago, these same people had whispered behind her back, the girl who sold herself for land, the girl who married a ghost. Now they were here to celebrate her. When Grayson entered, the room turned to look. He still walked with a slight limp from the fire, but his presence filled the space effortlessly. Quiet power, the kind built from surviving storms. He gave her a nod, that small, private smile only she understood. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't use a speech or notes. She looked out over the crowd, familiar faces, curious ones, a few humbled. And she began simply. "When I first came to Bitterroot Valley, I thought this land was my sentence. I thought silence meant loneliness, and that a locked door meant rejection." She paused, eyes finding Grayson's. "But I've learned that sometimes silence isn't punishment. It's protection. And sometimes the gifts that make the least noise change everything." The room was still. Even the cameras seemed to wait. Grayson Holt didn't buy my life. He returned it. He gave me freedom, and in that freedom, I found purpose. Applause began softly, then grew, rising like wind through the valley. Grayson looked down, his jaw tight with emotion. He had never liked praise, but this wasn't about pride. It was about peace. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Ivy and Grayson walked to the ridge overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, gold spilling across green, shadows painting the earth in warm amber. "I keep thinking about that day, the fire, the storm, the box, every little thing that led us here." Grayson smiled. "You think too much." She laughed lightly. "Maybe, but I also think some storms aren't meant to destroy us. They're meant to reveal who will walk through them with us." He reached for her hand. "And who we become after." For a long moment, they stood there, two survivors of love and loss, silence and flame, looking over the land that at once held their fears, now holding their legacy. As dusk deepened, Ivy turned toward him. "Do you regret it, the way it all began?" He shook his head. "Not the beginning, not the fire, not even the silence." She smiled. "Then what?" He met her eyes. "That I didn't open the box first." They both laughed quietly.
Later, as lanterns flickered across the fields, Ivy whispered one last time to the valley, "Some gifts make noise, others make the whole world go quiet." And the wind carried it away, not as sorrow, but as promise. The valley didn't whisper anymore. It listened. Have you ever realized that what once broke you became the very thing that built your strength? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the quietest stories, the ones born from pain, courage, and grace, are the ones that change everything.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you loved this story, you will definitely love the next one. It's more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So go ahead and watch it now. Click on the image on your screen right away to watch the next one. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps and encourages us to share the best human interest stories you'd love.